Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, tasliman kathira. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh. So, Imam Khalid Griggs had a daunting task to present several hundred years of history in 15 minutes. So, as you saw, it was extremely challenging. So I have a daunting task to present several hundred years of history in 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to keep it short. If you ever see my wife in the audience, she goes like that. It's a signal, like the kiss. Keep it short, stupid. So. So we're talking about essentially from even before 7/11, when it's a good date, right? 7/11, when Tariq bin Ziyad, who was the son of a Berber convert to Islam. So when the armies of Musa bin Nusayr, one of the great Syrian generals, swept across North Africa, and they conquered the lands of the Berbers, many, not all, the actual introduction into Islam of the Berber people took place. And this is the case in most lands that were politically conquered by the Muslims, but it wasn't a case that people were forced to become Muslims. Even it's said that the Umayyads, and Musa bin Nusayr was an Umayyad general, generally discouraged conversion, because number one, they were focused on maintaining an Arab elite, and secondly, they wanted the tax money to come in. So if the people became Muslim, they wouldn't have to pay the kharaj. So it was one of the Umayyad Khalifas, the very famous Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who ended that practice and encouraged conversion with his famous statement, "We weren't sent by Allah as tax collectors. We were sent to bring the religion of Allah to the people." So in any case, Tariq was not the first Muslim. Muslims had gone into Spain before Tariq, but he was the one who really conquered the Iberian, large parts of the Iberian Peninsula, present-day Spain and Portugal. He was under the command of Musa bin Nusayr. Musa appointed him as the governor of Tanja, or Tangier, in Morocco. And the story goes, then Musa fell back to Khairawan in present-day Tunisia. The story goes that Julian, who was a Spanish king in what's now Ceuta, in north-central Morocco, west of Tanja, when Roderick, the Visigoth king of Spain, ascended to the throne, Julian sent his daughter there to study in the court of Roderick, and Roderick raped her, and Julian became so incensed, he encouraged Tariq to go into Spain, and he basically outlined where the weaknesses were and how Tariq will go about it. But in any case, Tariq went in and subsequently conquered large parts of Spain. Musa bin Nusayr reinforced Tariq's army of 7,000, it said, with 5,000 additional troops. So Tariq had an army of 12,000. When they crossed, it said, Allahu Alam, that when they arrived to the Spanish side, Tariq ordered all the boats to be burned and said, "You're not going back. Either you're going to conquer this country or you're going to die, but you're not going back, because we burned the boats." Yuqal. And it said, Allahu Alam. Did it go down like that? Allah knows best. So in any case, Tariq went in. They had an epic battle against Roderick and his force of approximately 10,000 Spanish soldiers. Roderick was killed in battle, and then Tariq proceeded to conquer large parts of Spain. Musa eventually joined him a year later, and collectively, even though they had a very contentious relationship, some say Musa was jealous of Tariq's success, Allahu alam. Anyway, collectively they were an unbeatable force, which, and this is one of the interesting side notes of history, that army was broken up. And its strength, when they went into France, the strength of the army had been broken because in 714, 3 years after Tariq had conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula, both Tariq and Musa were called back to Damascus by Walid I, Walid al-Awwal, and that army lost its two most critical generals, one a Berber, Tariq bin Ziyad, and one an Arab, Musa bin Nusayr. And so had both Tariq and Musa stayed in the Iberian Peninsula, they likely would have conquered France, and the entire history of the world would have been different. But that's one of those Allahu Alam moments in history. In any case, very quickly after the conquest, the initial conquest, the Muslims were basically without leadership. Once Tariq and Musa were called back, there was a lot of anarchy. That period of anarchy saw the Spanish gradually regroup and began to take back some of their lost lands until Abdurrahman al-Dakhil. Abdurrahman was the last surviving Umayyad prince. And many of you know the story of what happened to the family. So we won't go into that, but they were basically murdered by the Abbasids. And it was the first time in history that a Muslim had violated the oath of protection, the Aman. So as since the time of the Prophet ﷺ until that time, they were given an oath of protection to come into the Abbasid court, and then they were murdered. Abdurrahman escaped. He fled across Egypt, across North Africa, and eventually went into Spain and established a revival of the Umayyad Khilafah in Spain, which was the Western Caliphate, and the Abbasids were the Eastern Caliphate. Abdurrahman al-Dakhil restored order. He united the Berbers and the Arabs, and he opened the way for the beginning of massive conversion by the indigenous Spanish population. At the time when Islam was strong in Spain, the overwhelming majority of the Muslims were Spanish converts. And culturally, you can see this. If you see paintings, some still at the Al-Hamra, they have red beards, very European-looking people. Collectively, the Arabs, the Berbers, and the Spanish and Portuguese converts, Lisbon was a great center of Muslim learning. All traces of Islam were wiped out of Lisbon. So you don't even have the remnants that you have in Cordoba, which was Cordoba, or Cordova, or Granada, the Al-Hamra, and others. You have no trace in Spain. It was wiped out and obliterated. In any case, so there was a reign of stability. That reign also was called the Golden Age, where the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews and Christians played an important role in the conquest of Tariq and subsequently Musa bin Nusayr. The Jews were oppressed by the Catholics, and so they welcomed the Muslims. They opened the gates of the city in many instances to facilitate the conquest of the walled cities, as medieval cities were walled. The Arians, who were Unitarians, were oppressed by the Catholics. There were other heretical Christian sects who were oppressed by the Catholics, and so they aided the Muslims, and they saw the Muslims as liberators. They greeted them and assisted the coming of the Muslim armies into Spain. So this again shows that there are historical conditions that aid certain historical developments. It wasn't that the Muslims were so powerful they just rolled in. Julian was assisting them, and Julian had his allies in Spain. The Arians, the Unitarians were assisting the Muslims. The Jews were assisting the Muslims. And collectively, they facilitated a new era in Spain. That new era was qualified for a long period of time by mutual cooperation, by a brilliant intellectual flourishing that was carried by the Arabic language. Arabic was the language of the intelligentsia. Christians, Jews, they all learned Arabic. Maimonides, the great Jewish scholar, started his career in Andalusia. Most of his important writings are in the Arabic language. He subsequently went to Morocco and then to Egypt. So there was a brilliant flourishing. One of the great wonders of the medieval world, Medina to Zahra, the Umayyad leaders during this golden age, their capital was in Cordoba. Outside, about 10 miles outside of Cordoba, they built a city from scratch. It was the largest architectural project in the medieval world. It was a beautiful city of palaces, libraries, pools, gardens. What happened to it? The Arabs, fearing the Spanish converts, because the Spanish converts saw them as lax and very lax Muslims. The leadership, they disarmed the Spanish converts because there were so many of them and they knew the land, it was their land. They feared that they would, to use Suhaib Webbian language, they feared that they would roll on them. And out of their fear, they disarmed the Spanish converts and they brought in the Berbers as their mercenaries and their protectors. It was the Berber armies that destroyed Arab rule in Muslim Spain. So it was Berber Muslim armies that destroyed Medina to Zahra. And it was Berber Muslim armies that ended Arab rule in the Iberian Peninsula. And then you had two significant Berber kingdoms established, that of the Murabitun and subsequently of the Muwahidun. And they had their virtues in their own right. But their reigns were short, and their reigns saw the beginning of the reconquest. Another historical fact of interest and relevance here, as the Muslims pushed the Crusaders out of the eastern part of the Ummah, out of Syria and present-day Syria, present-day Palestine, present-day Lebanon, southern Turkey, Antakya, the defeated Christian armies, many of them ended up in Spain joining the armies of the Reconquest. So the Reconquest began to pick up momentum as the Muslims were expelling the Crusaders from the eastern lands. So they would go across Europe into Spain and join the armies of the Reconquest, so it became a religious war for them. And these were battle-hardened troops, and first they liberated Portugal, and gradually descending from the north, more and more of Spain, until finally in 1492, the last independent Muslim kingdom in Granada fell to the Spaniards. One of the reasons for the Reconquest was the division, the pettiness, and the power-hungry nature of many of the Muslim rulers. Many of the Muslim rulers would enter into alliances with Christians against other Muslim kingdoms and principalities. So this is one of the reasons that for the Reconquest. After the Reconquest, there was an uneasy period of about 10 years where Ferdinand and Isabella agreed that the Muslims could continue to practice their religion. After about 10 years, they went back on that agreement, and the Inquisition started, where Muslims were either forcibly converted to Christianity or killed. Also Jews, for that matter. It wasn't just the Muslims. It was Muslims and the Jews who were the objects of the Inquisition. So it was a brutal reign of torture. What Khalid Griggs mentioned was quite accurate. Not only Columbus, but Cortez and his armies, De Soto, all of them came of age during the Inquisition. So when they came to the Americas, they knew exactly what a mosque was, because it was the job of the Inquisition to identify any mosque and destroy it. So when Columbus saw that mosque on the hill of Cuba, on the coast of Cuba rather, he knew exactly what he was talking about. When Cortez went into Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, I probably mispronounced it, the Aztecs' capital, and he wrote in his journals, which are extant to this day, this is a beautiful city. It has many beautiful mosques and temples. So if he just said mosque, we could say he just used that to refer to temples. If he just said temples, we could say he was talking about temples. He distinguished. He said it's a city that has beautiful mosques and temples. What was the battle cry of the Spanish armies in the New World? Santiago Matamoros. St. James killed the Muslims. Today we have a city, Matamoros, Texas. So if there are no Muslims there, why is the battle cry, kill the Muslims? They knew what pagans were. They had prior experience in Africa. They also knew what Muslims were. In any case, so the Inquisition starts and you enter the realm throughout the 16th century of the Moriscos. The Moriscos were those Muslims who were forcibly converted to Christianity. Many of them continued to practice Islam secretly. And so the Inquisition would look for shoes outside of houses. You know, it's a Muslim house. They would look for creases on the back of the pants. You know, you were doing jalsa. So Muslims had to practice in secret. If you read Don Quixote, Cervantes, you read about many of the people who are practicing Islam in the cave. He doesn't call it Islam, but read their description. The Moriscos continue to perpetuate Islam. They recently excavated what appeared to be an old barn. Inside of the barn, there was a masjid. The barn was the cover for a masjid in Spain. My time is up, but I'm at the end of the story. In 1609, King Philip expelled all of the Moriscos from Spain. So it was a forced ethnic cleansing of Christians whose families had been Muslim. And it was feared they were secretly maintaining Muslims. They were expelled from Spain. Many of them died in the process. It was a brutal process of uprooting entire communities in some cases. So that is what, in brief, your brothers and sisters went through in Spain. So when you think you have it bad, just read a little history, and you'll see how good you have it. And give thanks to Allah. Give thanks to Allah for the blessings He's bestowed upon us. Allah Ta'ala tells us, and we'll close on this, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. When your Lord proclaimed, if you give thanks for my blessings, I will increase you in those blessings. And if you reject the blessings, you fail to give thanks, you should know that my punishment is severe. Give thanks for the blessing of safety and security that we enjoy in this country. It's not perfect, but no one's living in fear. We definitely have political prisoners. Imam Jamil, many feel, was unjustly accused, and therefore his subsequent conviction and incarceration are unjust. You have others, but by and large, we enjoy safety, we enjoy security, we have ample food, we're free to practice our religion. Give thanks for that, because as we see in places like Syria, security can go very quickly. As we see in other places, the ability to freely practice Islam, it can be taken away very quickly. Give thanks, reflect on those who preceded you, carry on the struggle that they were not able to carry on. Live for their sake. Worship for their sake. Continue to be a proud Muslim for their sake. Don't hold your head down and mope because people are talking about you on television. Turn the television off. You don't have to worry about it. Stand up and get involved. As Keith Ellison likes to say, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. Assalamu alaikum.